What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. My name's Rad Burmeister. I'm joined by Richard Lellis. As you can see next to me there, we are two of the three founders and creators of Unity Gym and the Unified Movement System. And we're here today to talk about back injury rehabilitation, how you can fix your back pain so that you can do more of the things that you love. This is something that's near and dear to me because I've suffered with some terrible back pain over the years. I've got something called spondylolisthesis in my L4, L5. Got a pars defect, and I've had a lot of pain. So something that I've dealt with a lot. But before we get into all of that, how are you doing today, Richie?
Right, I'm good. Pretty cold here though.
Yeah,
Freezing here in Sydney.
yeah.
Um, but
it's
not too bad.
it's funny
Getting all
though
the
when we say that. I was on a call with some of our members this morning, Richie from over in Boston, and it's summer over there for them, of course. And I said to them, "It snows where you guys are in winter, isn't it?" And they said, "Yeah, yeah." They laughed, and I said, "Yeah, we're probably pretty wimpy then when we talk about cold. It's like 8 degrees Celsius over here. I don't know what that is Fahrenheit, but it's well above freezing. It's not near freezing, and we're sitting here going, 'Oh my God, it's so cold.'" It is what it is. So what I want to talk about today is that my brother Yanni, who's one of the other founders of Unity Gym and creators of the UMS, is he's also suffered really bad back pain. He fell off a horse when he was much younger. I saw it happen, and his foot got caught in the stirrup, and he got dragged up the road and bounced around, and he suffered some fractures in his back as well, and he's had plenty of back pain. As a result of it, I also fell down a 10-foot ravine or so with my 20 or 30 kilograms or whatever of body armor and weapons and ammunition when I was an infantry soldier serving over in East Timor with Richard. And that really aggravated my back issues as well. And so we were really forced to work out a way to be able to enjoy life and enjoy the things that we love without pain as we got older. Because for me, my lower back pain got so bad that when I got out of the army when I was 34 and I went back to doing coaching people in the gym, I couldn't stand up for more than about 5 or 10 minutes without being in really bad pain. It's horrible. And so, yeah, we went to work. I was seeing a chiropractor every week, and a sports masseuse every other week, and working with physiotherapists, and just getting a much deeper understanding of how you deal with back pain. And it really comes down to three principles that we have learned to apply to almost all injuries, which is number one, first principle, you need to strengthen the inner unit and the outer unit in a 1-to-1 ratio. Number two, second principle, we need to create structural balance from left to right side. So, unilateral balance in your body, and also structural balance from pushing and pulling movements. So, agonist and antagonist, opposing muscle groups within the same joint. And then the final piece of the puzzle is a balance between strength and flexibility. And what we've found is that without any of these three things, that you will still suffer with lower back pain. And what we've seen is that most strategies that people are putting out there are usually only either dealing with the symptoms, not the problem, or they're not dealing with all three of those issues. So we've seen rehab programs, they're great programs, but they only deal with the inner unit. And then you see people that suffer with back pain and they train a lot themselves and they only train the outer unit. You can see plenty of examples of people that do a lot of flexibility work, but they don't do any strength work, and vice versa. So yeah, this is what this really boils down to. And so if we go deeper into it, what does it mean? So the inner unit and the outer unit, we've got the muscles that make up the inner unit are the deeper stabilization muscles. So when it comes to lower back pain, we can talk about core muscles, but there's also a lot of people have probably heard of the rotator cuff in the shoulder joint, which is a group of four muscles that act like a force coupling that hold the humerus in the glenohumeral joint. So it's a ball and socket joint, but in the shoulder, it's more like a golf ball on a golf tee, and the rotator cuff holds it all in place. A lot of people have heard of that. What a lot of people haven't heard of is that there's a similar muscle system in the hip joint that acts in the same way. The big difference with the hip joint is that the hip really is a ball in socket like this. It's very, very, very stable. It's very hard to dislocate the hip, and if you ever do that, that's a real problem because the hip is so stable and so strong. The shoulder isn't like that. The shoulder is much more easily dislocated. So when you refer to the inner unit and the outer unit, when it comes to the hip joint, we're talking about that, those cuff of muscles in the inner part of the hip that really stabilize the hip joint. But we're also talking about the core muscles, the muscles that help to hold to support the pelvis and the spine in place, that when they're acting correctly and the pelvis is sitting where it wants to sit, it reduces strain on certain muscles that are going to, aggravate lower back pain. So that's the inner unit we've spoken about. Then there's the outer unit, of course. The outer unit are the bigger muscles, the superficial muscles that we can see on the surface, things like the glutes, which is the muscle group that makes up your butt, quadriceps, hamstrings, the bigger muscle groups that are on the outside of the body, the superficial muscles, you call it, that create movement. So they're the things that make us walk and climb stairs and jump and squat and deadlift and all those things. So we need a balance of strength between both of them. We need to train both of those units, the inner unit and the outer unit. So that's point one. Point number two is creating structural balance. So an example of structural balance training, and where a lot of people get it wrong, is if you have an injury and you injure one side of your body and you don't do anything to rehabilitate and regain structural balance, what happens often is that when you start doing bilateral movements, things like barbell back squatting or front squatting or any kind of deadlifting with a barbell where you're using both legs, they're called bilateral movements. And what happens is the stronger side does the majority of the work, especially when you go closer to failure, which is where the majority of the adaptation occurs anyway. And you start to, over time, the imbalance that was created from this injury, that gets worse and worse and worse. And in extreme cases, you can even see this imbalance in people. You can see, if you have a look at them from behind, if they've got their shirt off, you can see a difference of size in the musculature from one side of the body to the other. You can see it in the way that people walk, like physical therapists will often get you to do a walking test, and they can tell you that you have this imbalance in your body just by the way you're walking or by the way you're standing. Chiropractors will get you to stand, and they'll look at how your pelvis sits and stuff, and they can tell you imbalances that way. And if you the way to one of the main ways to overcome those imbalances is through the use of unilateral exercises. So, for example, doing single leg deadlifts rather than bilateral deadlifts, where you're doing both legs at the same time. Single leg squats, step ups, split squats, lunges. There's a whole bunch of different exercises that you can do that will help to regain that structural balance. And it's more important for people that are earlier on in the rehabilitation phase of an injury, or that have structural imbalances like this from left side to right side. That's more important for them to be doing these unilateral exercises. The further you come away from an injury and the further you come into a more balanced body, the less important it is. So, for people like Yanni, Richard, and me who have been doing this stuff for a while, we don't have to do as much unilateral work as somebody who is earlier on in their journey of rehabilitating back injury or trying to overcome back pain. So that's the first part of structural balance, left side to right side. And then we have the aspect of structural balance, which is within a single joint. So within one joint. So let's talk about the hip joint on the right side. Muscles that move the hip. For example, hip flexors and hip extensors. So glutes, hamstrings, hip extensors, psoas iliacus, and quads, or rectus femoris for the hip flexors. There's a relationship between the balance of strength between those muscles, where if the muscles that create hip extension, which is when your leg goes back behind you, if the balance is out of whack with those from hip flexion, you don't have this structural balance that we're talking about, then that can lead to issues where, like, for example, if you're playing sport or you trip, like even if you're just walking along and you slip, there's all these muscle contractions that go on in a nanosecond that you're not in control of, that are a part of a system called proprioception in the body that's prevent us from falling over. And if you've got a major imbalance in the hip joint when that happens, but this structural balance or imbalance that I'm talking about here, then when that happens, to try to stabilize you, that's when, if one side of the hip fires way harder than the other side, you can cause muscle spasms, and that can aggravate injuries, lead to problems. Like, there's all these different things that happen, when you have these imbalances in the body. So that's the second point, structural balance. So balance from left side to right side, balance from agonist to antagonist. And then the final piece of the puzzle that we talk about is a balance between strength and flexibility. And we see this a lot. And probably a lot of people can relate to this. There's people out there who are so flexible, they can fold themselves into a pretzel, but they're very weak relatively in relation to their flexibility. Like when you, people never like being called weak, and when you see somebody that's really flexible and point out that they are weak compared to somebody else who is of a similar weight. People don't like hearing that, but I'm talking about, if you can do the full splits and back bends and fold your leg over your head, but you can't squat even half your own body weight, that's a major imbalance. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which you see a lot more often, which is people that are really strong. They're so muscly, and they've got this amazing looking physique, or they can lift an impressive amount of weight, but they can barely touch their toes, or they can't sit cross-legged or anything like that. Those two imbalances are major problems, and they will also prevent you coming to a pain-free state of existence with your with your back pain. And this is something that this is really at the foundation of the way that we help deal with people with back pain. And we've had so many people come to us who have had like crippling back pain, to the extent where, like, I can think of members, Richie, that we've had at Unity Gym, that when they started and I showed them the deadlift or the Jefferson curl, which are both movements that heavily rely on the posterior chain muscles, on using your lower back strength and things like that, but they looked at it and said, "Oh, I can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" And they said an injury that we often hear from people is, they said they've got a herniated disc or disc problems. And I say, "Oh, wow, that's a real shame. I'm sorry to hear that. Why don't we just get a 4 kilo, which is like 8.5 pounds or something, weight, and we'll just do it with that?" And they go, "Oh, no, I can't do that." So this is somebody that has such bad back pain that they believe that they can't even lift, 4 kilos or 8.5 pounds. And what we do is we go through a progressive periodized program with them, which means that you start from exercises and an amount of weight that doesn't make their pain or their injury flare up, which is the real secret. And then you gradually increase the intensity over time, and you work on balance of inner unit and outer unit, number one, structural balance, left side to right side, and agonist and antagonist, number two, and balance between strength and flexibility in every workout. And these same people that were that afraid of deadlifting or doing Jefferson curls or anything that involved those lower back muscles, within a matter of months, and I'm not going to say like 6 weeks later or 30 days later, but 6 to 9 months or so, are deadlifting 1.5 times their own body weight. So this is let's say they're a 180-pound person, they're deadlifting 270 pounds. That's huge, for that kind of a change to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like we've said it before, it's not the exercise that is the issue, but it's, how you get to the load that you're lifting that is the issue. And often the case, these people fearing these exercises is simply because they're trying to lift too much too early. They need to regress further to a point where they're not getting these pain symptoms. And they can manage to repeat these exercises with consistency, with volume, so that their body does get used to it. Because, you know, another thing is, all the advice that we've given now is like of a general nature. Like, we're not physiotherapists. We have to acknowledge that. Like, you should first of all go see somebody who has got a degree, who is a physiotherapist that can properly diagnose your back pain first. But what we've found
Hmm.
over the years of training people is generally it's a matter of improving strength in some way to help people with these issues, with these symptoms. Yeah, and like Brad said, through
Yep.
structural balance, through appropriate loading over time, and also not the. I think it's a good point to bring up, like the educating people, like that it's not the exercise again. That's the issue. It's the appropriate loading of the exercise. Because if you eliminate someone from deadlifting completely, or just the simple hip hinge movement pattern, you're eliminating such a big part of building posterior chain strength. Like it's, I think, very
Mm.
negligent to do that for people, to completely
Yep.
take it out of their um, exercise vocabulary, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I think it needs to be in this in some way, shape, or fashion. It just needs to be attuned to the right intensity for them.
Yep. And it's, so much of this, so much of our strategies and principles that we use to overcome back pain come from working with Phil and Nilesh from ADPT Physio and other friends of ours who are exceptional sports physiotherapists that work with some of the top athletes in Australia. And that's where we've developed our strategies from. These aren't, we didn't, we're not just coaches that are saying, oh, just try this. We read this in a book or saw it online. We've been fortunate enough to work very closely with sports physiotherapists for well over a decade now, close to 2 decades. And yeah, it's phenomenal to see those guys when people come in and say, oh, I injured my back deadlifting. I need you to help me fix it. And the exact exercise that they get them working on is a deadlift. And it comes down to, getting the load right, choosing which means, choosing the amount of weight you do, the amount of reps you do, the amount of recovery between workouts before you do another set of deadlifting, and working on the pattern, working on the movement pattern. And if you want to know, like if you're listening to this and thinking, all right, well, give me an example. What does a workout look like that does inner unit, outer unit, all these things? So an example of a workout to help, and again, this goes like you've got to remember what Richard just said. Like, if you haven't been diagnosed by an expert, then that's a really good place to start. But if you've been cleared to be able to do some exercise, then this is an example of what a workout would look like that we would do to help people to overcome lower back pain. So we do a mobility warm-up first, which is all just about increasing circulation, body positioning drills, activating muscle activation drills. It's not stretching. It's to prepare you for a workout and to prime the body and tell the central nervous system that we're about to lift some weight now. And then we do like some form of a deadlift pattern as the primary lift. And that might mean, like, for somebody that's so compromised, it might be starting with a dowel rod, meaning no weight, but holding onto something and practicing the movement pattern of a deadlift. And then gradually, over a couple of sets or over a couple of weeks, just adding a very small amount of weight, like even 5 pounds or 10 pounds, like something that's really, really light, but that just gives a little bit of a stimulus there. And we pair that movement with shoulder flexibility as well. We always do flexibility in other parts of the body that we're doing. And that's the exercise that, it's funny, the deadlift actually trains the inner unit and the outer unit because there's so much core activation going on when you do a proper deadlift. But then what we would do is we would do for supplementary exercises, we would do maybe some single leg deadlifts, like something that creates that instability in the body, to work on the unilateral strength. And then also some specific core work, things like a planks are a really good exercise to do for people that are struggling with lower back pain, because the way that it trains the inner unit of the core to help to stabilize the spine and just keep everything where it needs to be. Planks are a great exercise for that. And then if somebody's that compromised, if they can't even do like the deadlift, or if the plank is an issue, you can do things like you can replace the deadlift with things like hip thrusts. And you can do shoulders elevated hip thrusts with a barbell across your hips, or for somebody that's that compromised, you can do a supine hip thrust just with your shoulders on the ground. And then you can do unilateral hip thrust as well. And the reason why that is a good alternative to a deadlift is because there's no lateral force on the spine. Like when you're doing a deadlift, of course, there's a point where when you're bending over, and you're bracing against like force pushing against your spine or pulling down against it. Whereas when you do a hip thrust, that's not happening because gravity is pushing against you from the front. So that's very, very
You mean
different than
compressive
gravity
force?
pushing. Compressive force, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
straight down. Yeah, the spine.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that's an example of a workout that you can do to help to overcome this stuff. And it's the thing is, people often ask for the silver bullet thing. They often say like, "What's the workout that I should do?" or "What's the exercise that I should do to overcome this?" And like my last point for this topic is that there is no silver bullet. There's no one exercise that you can do. There's no one workout that you can do. What there is progressive overload and periodization. So there's working out what you can do now that improves your situation and doesn't make it worse. And then you do that for a period of time, usually, 4 weeks is what we use for a periodized phase of programming. And then you go to a slightly different variation of those same exercises that creates a new stimulus, a new continues. And as that process continues, you get stronger, you get more flexible. Am I cutting out, Richie, there?
Just for a
No?
second there. I think it's doing it
No,
again, but just for that one
no,
second
great.
there.
Okay. Yeah, but that process of adaptation is what creates the real change. So there's no silver bullet exercise to do. There's no silver bullet workout. There's just going through the process of it. We're actually writing a lower back rehab blueprint right now. It should be ready in the next week or two. It's going to be free for anybody, so you can get that and read over this stuff, and there'll be an example workout in there as well. Or if you really want to dive in the deep end and just get started, you can get our UMS coaching app for less than $2 a day. If you click the link, unitygym.com in this video, and you can see exactly how we do it, because the UMS program is exceptional at fixing this stuff. It's what it's been created for. And that's it. I think that's all we got time for today. Hey, Richie.
Yep. Yep. We're off to coach our coaching group members.
Yep, our UMS coaching group members now. Anybody, if you've got any questions, anything about lower back pain or any kind of injury, really, if you want to be able to do more of what you love without pain, just put it in the comments, and we'll try and get you in tomorrow's show. We've had a lot of interest in this topic of, overcoming injuries so you can do more of what you love without pain. So if you have questions, put them in the comments, and we will hit you up tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you soon.
Everybody.